Well, hello everybody. This is meteorologist Andrew Pinero with this review of the 2020 Tesla Model 3. So in this video, this is going to be a
1 year
review of the Tesla Model 3. And we're going to talk everything that you could possibly want to know. We're going to talk all about that, the good, the bad, and the ugly with the Tesla Model 3 and just an electric vehicle in general. So if you want to find out more about that, feel free to keep watching the rest of this video. Alright, so back in the Tesla here, let's talk a little bit about quality control. Here, knock on wood, I have not had any major quality control issues whatsoever. And in terms of minor quality control issues, in 1 year, I've had one. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But at least from the interior here, there's really nothing major. The only thing I will point out is going to be just one little piece. Very, very minor. So let's take a look in the back seat here. Alright, so the one very minor thing, it looks like that weather sealing is just a little bit too big for this door here. That is it. That is quite literally it. Nowhere else through here are there any other kind of quality control issues whatsoever. I am so thankful that this car has been really good. And I'll get to the one other minor quality control issue outside the car in a second, but I want to give my thoughts as to why. I believe I have had very little quality control issues. My thought is because this is a used Tesla. And you might be thinking, used? Oh, so it's probably going to have some minor issues. This is something that my friend told me. With new Tesla Model 3s rolling off the line, Teslas in general, because they're pumping them out so fast and their quality control measures may not be the best, you may have issues that do pop up once you are about to take delivery. And before you accept and take delivery, you're doing a once-over of the car to make sure there's nothing wrong. My guess is the original owner of this car may have had issues. I have no idea. I don't know who it is. I don't know about any of the service records before I got this car. Now, my thought is, and this is what one of my friends that had a Tesla before me thought, if there happened to be a quality control issue that was either addressed before taking delivery or within that first year before I got the car, it was addressed already. So any issues would have been taken care of prior to me getting the car. So I think that may be the case here. And I'll show you the one exterior quality control issue, so let's head outside and take a look at that. Now that we're outside of the car, the panel gaps, I know this was a big thing for a lot of people. This may look big, but this is technically within spec for Tesla. They have a 6mm tolerance for panel gaps. That is well within that. Now you may notice little things like this that may not line up properly, or something like here, or that is misaligned. I frankly don't care about something like this. Some people do. I'm not one of those people. But if you do have an issue with that, you can see if Tesla can fix it. But from what I asked when I picked up and took delivery of my Tesla, that is within spec. So even though the panel gap may not be consistent, may have little things like that, it's actually not out of spec for the Tesla. Now the one thing I actually did bring this in for was right here in the front. So when I opened up the front, right now, opens up totally fine, no sounds. Before, right over here, this piston was squeaking, or something around here was squeaking. I don't know if it was this piston or not, but whenever I closed the frunk, see now it sounds very quiet. Before, whenever I started closing the frunk, this, something around here was squeaking very loudly. Now, when I did bring this into Tesla, they took a look at it, they acknowledged that they heard the issue, and all the write-up said was they took everything off. They actually took the whole frunk lid here, the hood. They took this off, they re-lubricated everything, every little piece inside there, both spots, and reassembled everything. And now, it's very quiet again. So in terms of quality control, I feel very lucky that this car has only had one issue that it really isn't an issue. It's a squeak in a frunk. Not a big deal at all. But Tesla was very, very helpful with this. And we'll talk a lot about the Tesla service in the section coming up. But in terms of quality control, this car I would give a 98% out of 100, or 98%. That's my rating for quality control on my Tesla Model 3 2020 specifically. And that can't be said for every Tesla Model 3, but again, this is my review, my experience, my car, and that's the grade I'm going to give it, a 98 out of 100. All right, so now let's move on to the next section here. All right, so our next section here, let's talk a little bit about storage, the trunk and the frunk, and a little bit of compartment and interior storage. But let's start with the most interesting part of an electric car, specifically the Tesla, because not every electric car has a good frunk. Some of them, they just house the electronics up there and you really don't get much space, but this is pretty decent, I would say, especially for not having an engine up there. All right, so let's talk about that. I'm going to show you and start with the frunk here. All right, so I already popped this open. That can be done from the touchscreen inside the Tesla or from the app. There's actually this is kind of a weird thing. There's no exterior way to get into the frunk. The only way is if you have a total power failure. There's a little piece in here. You're supposed to jump a couple of cables that are inside there, assuming that has no power to the car, and that pops open the frunk. But that's an emergency situation, but in normal use, there's no external way to actually get inside the frunk. So use the app or you use the touch screen in there. This pops open and then you just very gently let it go. And here we have the pistons. So in here, the frunk is fairly spacious. I have a couple tools from some maintenance stuff I was doing before. I do like that there's a light in here and the light doubles as the emergency trunk release. It's still kind of a trunk. But you can definitely get some shopping bags in there. You can get maybe one piece of luggage in there. I have a giant duffel bag whenever I go traveling, and that can go very easily in there. Here's a tow hook if you have to tow it. That tow hook does also go into that spot there. Now also, this is watertight, so if something does spill, there's nowhere for it to go. The screws really here, they may be the only spot that has an issue, but the way this is slanted, all the water would be collecting down here if something spills, and that is watertight. Speaking of watertight, we have very thick waterproof ceiling there, so that when it mates with that outline there, it creates a solid seal. With rain, I have never, knock on wood, had an issue with leaks inside here. So that's pretty cool to have that front space. And down below underneath this is actually the radiator, which we talked about in the exterior, that there was a vent for the radiator. That's actually in that slanted spot right below this. But I do really like having extra space up front here. Now let's take a look on the inside. This car is probably the most spacious car I have ever owned. The seats are very comfortable, as I've mentioned in the interior section, but let's talk a little bit about the compartments. So let me pop in here. So in this, right in there, we have some storage under there. There's a tray, and there's more deep storage in there. As I mentioned earlier, there's more storage up there. So there's a lot of storage. Then moving on to the rear, you don't have a pass-through to get to the trunk from here, unfortunately. But the trunk we will talk about right now. All right, for the trunk, you can either use the touchscreen to open it, the app, or there is actually an exterior button under here. You press the button, you lift this up, and it opens up. It opens up pretty wide. I didn't expect it before I owned it, but all of this from before, that was all part of the trunk lid. And this indent here is to house the lift mechanism and the pistons there. And interior, it is so spacious inside here. This is actually more space than my WRX, which I am very happy for. That's normal trunk space. Now, you do get a couple of extra things. On the side here, you get an extra pocket over there. And because there's no transmission and no axle, you get very deep storage underneath here. So I have quite a bit of stuff. I have a duffel bag that's like an emergency kit, extra work shirts. I have the actual mobile charger in there, a flare set, a solar, the battery generator I have that can connect and take power from the Tesla here. But overall, the trunk is really spacious. So in terms of the Tesla Model 3, I would give this an A-. Great amount of storage. My only complaint is going back to the trunk. The opening is very narrow or kind of constrained. Because you have the solid glass back going all the way down for that nice aerodynamic look and the lowest drag coefficient of almost any car out there, it creates a bit of a narrow opening to get into the trunk. So if you're trying to load big totes, you may have a bit of a hard time getting it in, but once it's past the opening, there's plenty of space for it. That's where maybe the Tesla Model Y would be a bit more of a practical car. That car has a hatchback style opening, and it opens pretty much the entire back of the car. So if you're looking more for a practical everyday use Tesla, the Model Y might be for you. If you're looking for a more sporty, performance kind of oriented Tesla, the Model 3 is the one for you. All right, and that is it for the trunk and the front. Let's move on now to the next section. All right, so let's talk very briefly about maintenance with the Tesla Model 3. And this is a brief section, and you've seen some of my Full Throttle Thursday episodes on Tesla maintenance or electric car maintenance in general. There's really not much to happen in here. So let's take a look inside the maintenance for the Tesla Model 3. So we were just recently in the front, and this is where two of the maintenance pieces come from. The first one, your more regular maintenance, is right here, windshield wash. The only real thing you have to worry about on the almost weekly kind of maintenance in the front, or in general with the car, windshield wash. You got to fill the windshield wash. And now under here, this is a panel that comes up. Just little clips that hold it in place there. Now you're starting to see some of the guts of the electric car. So that's just an air intake for the cabin. And there's a car battery in here. And you might be wondering, if there's a big battery on underneath the car, then why is this? some systems do still need a 12-volt battery. So this is one of those maintenance-free batteries, so it's one that's not going to be replaced too often, but this is something that is considered consumable, and this may need to be replaced eventually. And this is not often, and I don't know the pricing off the top of my head, but that's one of the maintenance pieces under here. The only other one besides the windshield wash I just mentioned is right here, brake fluid. This is your master cylinder and the brake booster all the way tucked in back there. All you have to do here is just maintain the brake level, the brake fluid level, and there should be a test for water. Brake fluid inside of water is not good at all, because when it heats up, the water turns to vapor and causes squishy brakes. So in here, basically, I'm not going to open this now because you want to minimize the amount of time you open your master cylinder reservoir there. But every so often, you should get a moisture tester for the brake fluid and test the amount of moisture content in there. If it gets too high, that's when you know you need a brake fluid flush. That's not something that you do often, maybe once every few years, and that's really about it. Also, while we're under here, the windshield wipers, again, this is typical windshield wipers, nothing special there, so those should be replaced once a year. Moving on here, we have in the wheels, tires. You want to maintain tires as per normal procedures. Now, these can be worn out faster because electric cars are usually heavier. This is 5,000 pounds. This is way heavier than my WRX. So tires may be worn out faster. So just maintain tire pressure, keep an eye on tread, and brakes. Just keep an eye on the brake pads. The car may let you know. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case. But for the brake pads, that just gets replaced like normal, so you can have a regular, garage or something like that replace brake pads in there, or you can bring it to Tesla. That's something that's kind of like standard maintenance inside of there. The one that is kind of unique, going back here, is not the actual main brake, because you can kind of see the regular brake pad in there. The rear caliper has the parking brake. So there's an electronic parking brake, and that's kind of it, right back in there. That's the electronic parking brake, and that's the wire connecting to it. Because basically that special parking brake clamps down on the disc to prevent the car from moving while it's in park. I don't know if regular maintenance shops or mechanic shops can change that brake, but if anything, Tesla can definitely do it because it's their car. So that's really the main things, is the brakes, the brake pads themselves, the brake fluid, the 12-volt battery, windshield wash, tire quality, and tire pressure. There's really nothing else under here. And because there's really nothing else to talk about, there's no oil, there's no coolant. Well, there is coolant, but the coolant's designed for the life of the car. So that's something that shouldn't really need any maintenance at all. Because there is still a radiator, and there is a system that heats up the battery in the colder months and cools the battery during the warmer months. So there is coolant or antifreeze in there running through a radiator. That shouldn't need to be replaced, but overall, there really isn't much maintenance compared to a gasoline engine car, and it's also just cleaner in general. But any maintenance, I would definitely check with Tesla themselves, because then they're the experts. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out through the app, it actually is, to Tesla, and they'll let you know what's needed and not. There's also questions that you can always ask Tesla to and call them up, but there's really not much in terms of maintenance. All right.